Hello and welcome to the Master Along video for Gone. Be sure to open the audio in your own DAW and follow along to maximize your learning so you can get better results when you master your next production. This version I'm showing you now requires different processing from the mixes I've provided, so you'll have to think carefully about how to apply these techniques. Okay, so first thing to do is to load up our reference tracks. Let's have a look. I've got them here. A reference track, and I'm also going to load in the original mix that we are working on as well. So this is the pre-master file. So here I want to have the reference track in free. Free here, not mirror, free. I've actually looped the section that is most important to compare against, and the pre-master, you want to have that in mirror so that it matches the playback location of the DAW transport. So we've got level match is all of the it's all matching to original. So these reference tracks will change their gain depending on how loud our mastering session is. So that'll give us a nice fair comparison throughout. Okay, so let's have a listen to the pre-master as it is without any processing, and we'll see what we feel needs to be done.
Like I used to, so I'm leaving. Consider me gone. Consider me gone. Hey, I'm saying what up to the world, what up to my ex, trifling girl.
So just looking at all the transits here, everything's looking quite nice. There's nice dynamic range between the different sections, and I can see all of the hits are nice and sharp here. So right off the bat, it's difficult to know exactly what we have to do to get this track sounding great for release. So that's why we have to use the reference track to give us that frame of reference to understand what changes we need to make. So I'm going to loop the loudest section of the track, which is the chorus over here, and I'm going to compare it to our reference track. So let's bring the volume back up and have a listen.
Most of my life I would run.
Okay, so what are we seeing here in reference? We're seeing that our track needs a bit of a cut around 200 Hertz, and it needs a big boost in the high frequencies. So that immediately gives us an idea of what tonal balance changes. So the low end is actually pretty comparable. So it's got this bulbous mid-range, and it's very dark, so we need to boost the high end. And I'm also seeing that the difference in gain is about 13. So what I might do is I might put about 10, 12 on the limiter just to bring it up to a kind of ideal loudness. So let's have another listen. Now that we've seen this, if we listen again to the track, let's see if we can match what we're seeing to what we're hearing. So yeah, I'm definitely hearing that now. Before, it's difficult to kind of make those decisions and be like, oh, it's sounding, not bright enough or whatever. But now that we see this and now we compare it to the reference track, which is it's a great reference track because the snares sound really similar. It's also got the strings. It's kind of got that hip-hoppy R&B kind of groove to it with the bass. Yeah, so it's really, really great. Okay, so what are we going to begin with? Before we start getting into the tonal balance, we could have a quick look at the stereo separation as well as the resonances. So let's have a look. So let's begin with the limiter. So it's about 13. So I'm just going to add 10 just to give us a bit of wiggle room. That's just going to give us a bit more gain. So just going to press play again. The volume will have changed. I'm going to bring this down slightly to bring it in.
Consider me gone. So I'm leaving.
So in levels here, I can choose the mastering output that I want it to go to, whether it's crazy loud, YouTube, Spotify. I'm going to go for club to get this master nice and loud. So we've got lots of headroom to play with here. Can push it a bit louder then. Get to 13, see what happens. Okay, we're still quite a few decibels off getting into any kind of trouble, so we'll leave it there for now. Let's see the dynamic range. Still nice and punchy. That's fine. Okay, so let's have a look at the stereo field. What I like to do here is I have my 4 bands set up, so 0 to 100, 100 to 1 kilohertz, and then 1 kilohertz to 6 kilohertz, and then the rest, so up to 20 kilohertz. I've got these 4 bands here, so number 1 relates to the low end. Let's see how the low end is looking here. So, here we go. Up to 200 hertz, there's actually quite a lot of width going on. Now that can be okay, and it can give some separation between the kick and bass, but as you can see, the red areas, that's where phase issues can come in. So if I lower this, and then we lower this down to about 100, there we go. We've monoed now those frequencies, so that's going to be nice and clean. Take the filter off. So now we can look at how the stereo width of our reference track is looking. Let's take the level line off there. What I'm doing is I'm just comparing how wide the blue shape is when I'm looking at both the original and the reference. And actually, they're very comparable. Maybe a touch more width, around 1K, 2K. So let's see around here. So it's the 3rd band. I can just lift this up a touch. I'm going to bring it back to volume. Nice. So the stereo width is pretty much in line now with our reference track. We can come back and tweak that later if we really want to. Because the track is actually so dull, what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch these around a little bit. I'm going to put reso below, and I'm going to bring mix room, which is usually at the bottom. I'm going to bring that to the top. And I'm going to deal with this high frequency discrepancy between our pre-master and the reference track. So let's have a quick look to give ourselves exactly kind of the expectations of what we want to see here. Okay, so I'm expecting to see a dip in the low mids of around 4 or 5 decibels, and then boosts in the high frequencies from 1K upwards of around 5-ish decibels. So that's kind of what we're looking for to get close to our reference track. So let's see what happens in Mixroom. So what I'm going to do is I'll open Mixroom, and I'm going to click the target icon here, search for the file. We're going to go for our reference track for Gone. I'm going to loop this section here, which is just that kind of chorus, it just kicks at the end here. Create targets. Now it's analyzing what's going on here, analyzing the track I just imported, and now we've got exactly what we anticipated. So we've got a bit of a cut in the low frequencies around here. You can see the frequencies on the sides here. So we've got around 300, a cut there, and then from 1K upwards, you've got this boost. So I'm going to click Add Smart Bands. Now, I've got filter mode on master, which means that all of my boosts and cuts are limited to plus minus 4 decibels. And I like that. I don't want to go too much here. So I'm going to leave it like that, and then we can do some more later if we really want to. But we've got the right kind of shape going on. The reason we have the limitation to plus minus 4 decibels is because we don't want to do such huge dramatic changes in the master, but equally as an EQ itself, when you limit the boosting and cutting range, you can actually have cleaner sounding EQs, filters. So that's why it's like this. So let's have a little before and after listen and see how it's going. Okay, it's going to come back up to volume now.
Consider me gone. Consider me gone. So
That's sounding obviously like someone's taken a blanket off the speakers, which is great. So now that we've got that boosted up a touch, we can have a listen to the resonances and see what we can find. So what I'll do is I'll open up Reso and I'm going to sweep my mouse around whilst holding Control. And that's going to give me a little boost in the different frequencies and allow me to hear when something pokes out of the mix. And then when something does, I can double click to initiate a node. So let's have a listen.
consider me gone. Consider me gone. So I'm leaving. Consider me gone.
What I'm doing is on the fly, so that the vertical position of the node is the point at which no other audio goes through. So you can see, for example, if I take this one here, if I hold Control, I can lock the left-right positioning. So here you can see the red delta dropping down is the amount of processing. Now, at this level, there's not loads of processing. So if I bring this down, you can see how the processing starts to increase. So that's fine. So if I bring it up, there's less processing, and here there's no processing. Now this is important because this means that on the fly you can double click depending on how much processing you want, which is helpful for me here. So I saw this frequency, and this frequency required a little bit more processing, so that allowed me to double click them a little bit lower so that the threshold was lower and therefore more processing was applied. And then you have these other frequencies that perhaps have less resonances going on, so you can position them just above where the frequencies are kind of poking through, so there's a lot less processing going on. So that's a nice workflow hack. So let's have a before and after listen. That's the delta. That's what's being removed from the mix. Bypassed.
Consider me gone. Consider me gone.
It's not a horribly resonant mix, but it just takes the edge off, and it makes the audio feel less fatiguing to listen to. Okay, great. So let's move on to the compression. I've got the Logic stock compressor here, which is actually quite versatile and sounds rather nice. You've got lots of different options here in terms of FET, FCA, VCA, FET, Opto. Opto is a good one for compression, for mastering compression. But I like the Platinum Digital. It's nice and transparent, doesn't do much to the sound. And so, okay, let's set up a good starting point. So what do we like? Auto gain off, release auto, that's fine. Attack 15, this is all fine. Ratio 2.1, I'm going to move that down to about 1.5 to 1. Makeup is at 0. Mix at 100%. Output and input gain both at 0. I'm going to turn on the soft distortion because that adds quite a nice character to the transients. We'll have a listen and see if we actually like it. And now we're going to, the idea is going to be to get the VU meter to dance up and down in time with the music, always resetting back to 0, so we're not doing too much clamping down on the overall signal. And we're going to see how much reduction we get. It could be quite a lot because we've got some nice transients in here. So let's take a listen, and we're going to adjust the threshold until we get that little bit of reduction going on.
Consider me gone. Consider me gone. So I'm leaving. Consider me gone.
So what have I done there? I have adjusted the threshold to get this little bit of reduction going on, and if I do any more, it's not going to return back to zero. So what we're at, minus 11 there. If I bring it down to minus 20, see how it doesn't get its way, it doesn't make its way back to zero at any point, and that's not what we want. I'm going to bring it up until it starts making its way back to zero. That's about there. Minus 12 is okay. And the distortion adds a little bit of volume. So for that reason, I've had to lower the output by 2.5 decibels to give me a fair comparison when I do a before and after test here. So I'm going to bring the volume back up. Pay attention to how the transients are sounding, how thick they sound, and also how cohesive everything sounds together now that we've got the compression on. So we'll do the before and after test now. Okay, volume back up.
Consider me gone. So I'm leaving. Consider me gone. Consider me gone.
So the main difference here is those transients are feeling less pokey, because we can see just how pokey they are by zooming in. Let's get rid of this out of the way. You can see from the mix that they're just poking through the mix, which is great, but perhaps they're a little bit sharp. And actually the compression just takes the edge off that and thickens them up a touch. So that's nice. So very, very small amount of compression there. One of the other nice things you can do here if you want to try something else is you can keep these settings and you can flick through and you can test the different sounds. So we can just quickly have a listen through the different ones and see if we like the sound of anything else.
Consider me gone. Consider me gone. So I'm leaving. Consider me gone. Consider me gone. So I'm leaving.
So I actually really like the sound of this VCA on this track. It's sounding really nice. I think it adds a touch more character, and the ballistics of the way the compressor is working just sounds nicer with the track. So it was a nice, easy way to flick through them. Of course, I had to adjust the thresholds because they react differently, and that's normal in this scenario. So just be aware of that as you jump through them. You probably will have to adjust the thresholds to work well with the actual compressor itself. But yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm confident that it sounds better in this scenario. So we're going to move on now. Try something a bit different here. So Dyne 1 by Leapwing is it's basically a multiband compressor, but the way I use it is in parallel mode, and you can use it to shape the overall tonal balance. And so we have these 5 different bands, and I have them at exactly the same amount. So minus 18, minus 18, minus 18. And what's it doing? It's doing parallel, multiband, parallel compression. And that beefs up the sound in a really nice way. So I'm going to show you how it sounds now. I'm going to do some before and after tests. And let's see if we like how it's sounding. So unfortunately, it doesn't have a level matching target, so I'm not able to accurately say, well, this is exactly how much volume it's adding. I'm going to see 2 decibels and see if that's about right.
Consider me gone.
So it's kind of bringing up some of that low-level stuff, which is just adding more excitement and energy to the track, which I love. It's a very, very simple approach. I'm not adjusting anything here. If there was, sometimes I use this plugin if I feel like there's, either not enough or too much low end. If there's not enough low end, I can unlink this particular band and just boost it right up, and that really brings up a lot of the low-level information, which can be very useful. I'm going to not delete the track, and I'm going to set this back to -18 because we do want to keep this. Oh, let's go back there. Get line 1, not particularly easy. Set this back to -18 manually then. There we go. Fine, and we're linked up again. That's fine. Okay, so now, happy with that. Let's compare it to, we should have been doing this more throughout the track, but let's go for the comparing it to the premaster before it went through any of these. So let's have a listen. So we can hear that the alignment has come out of whack because we started adding more plugins. So what we'll do is we'll go back to the beginning, going to click track align, reset, and we're going to play the audio.
No, 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 no. No, 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 I don't love you like I used to, so I'm leaving. Consider me gone. Consider me gone.
Perfect. So just resetting the track align there, got those two files back in unison because he's got all of this new stuff going on here, and that can, the latency pushes the tracks out of whack, so that's fine. Sounding really nice. It sounds a little bit harsh in some places, so I'm going to use Soothe to take the edge off that. But it's sounding, I mentioned it earlier, like someone's taken a sheet off the speakers, and I feel like I can really hear the clarity in that high end now. So let's compare it to the reference track and make sure we're still on the right path. So what we're still missing is this dip here, so we need to add a little bit of control around 200 Hertz. So how can we do that? We could do that dynamically using Pro Q3, a dynamic EQ. So let's see, 200 Hertz, it's about 5 decibels. So let's go 200, and I'm going to go -3, Q3. Let's see how that sounds.
Consider me gone. Consider me gone. Consider me gone.
Maybe what it's needing here is more of a actual cut rather than dynamic cut. So let's go copy to B, and I'm going to change that to an actual cut rather than dynamic cut. And let's see if that helps.
me go.
It's taken the edge off this cut in level in reference here by about 2 decibels, but I imagine that there's actually some instrumentational differences between the reference track and the track that we're working on that gives it this little dip as well. So we've kind of pushed it in that direction, but any more than that might be a little bit too much. However, when I bypass it, it does sound notably better. It does sound less boxy, more clear. So it's definitely moving in the right direction. I think I prefer the static cut to the dynamic cut, which I'm kind of surprised about, but you got to go with what your ears are telling you rather than what you think might be correct. So let's do a bit of an A/B test here between those two and then the bypass and make sure that we're definitely making the right decision.
Consider me gone. Consider me gone.
You know, I really like the static cut. What I might do is just add a bit of a dynamic boost here by 3 decibels. No, a boost plus 3 decibels, so that we just add a little bit more back to the track. So we're cutting quite a lot, but we're adding a bit more. It's going to bring some dynamic range in that area whilst also cutting the most boxy sounds. Actually, that is emphasizing the low end of the snare a bit too much. I'm going to just change that to 1.5 and try again. I don't like it. It's the static cut. It seems to be that's the winner. Well, there you go. So I'm actually really liking how that's sounding. So now let's move on to the bass room. Actually, before we do that, let's go for soothe next, because that's going to shape the high frequencies a little bit more. And then that can mean that when we use bass room, that's like the final touch. So let's go on to soothe here. These are my kind of standard static settings that I like to use. So to here, about midway on the sharpness, a little bit less on the selectivity, even balance, left-right mode is okay. Sometimes mid-side is also fine. In fact, I prefer mid-side because that gives me a bit more control. And got a little bit of the majority of the processing is happening in the high frequencies. But in this case, I'm going to use the comparison between the reference track and our master to help us make decisions on how to use soothe. Because what we're doing here is when we push up, we're reducing those particular frequencies. So let's have a listen. It's very, very subtle. This is what we're removing from the mix. This is the delta. Although that's probably boosted compared to what we're actually reducing to kind of emphasize what's being reduced. This is very, very subtle processing, and it's just kind of flattening out the tonal balance basically, and anything that's kind of resonating, small tonal spectral resonances that are coming through, and just kind of making it a bit more even. So this is, again, it's very subtle. So let's do a bypass again and see how we like it.
Consider me gone. Consider me gone.
I think I actually prefer it without, because I feel like we've done a lot of controlling of the tonal balance, the transients, and some resonances already. And then when I implement this, even with very low settings, it just kind of sucks a little bit of the life out. So in this circumstance, I'm not going to use it. All right, let's go for the final low frequency adjustments. We are loading our reference track in, which is gone, and that's the reference track for gone, which is this one. I've looped that section without the kicks at the end. Create targets, and we're going to analyze the track.
Consider me gone.
So the reason we're getting some changes here in bass drum that don't line up to the exact low end here in reference is because bass drum is actually analyzing the whole frequency spectrum, including the high end, and seeing how the bass relates to the high frequencies. And as we saw, if I just mute this, we're still getting a bit of a suggestion to boost in the high end, but also cut around 200. So we're getting this big cut range around here, and then slightly cutting in these ranges as well. And by doing that, that's going to give us the boost in the high end. So bass drum takes the whole frequency spectrum into account when it's making these suggestions. So let's go with it. So what I can do is I can click Control, and that's going to solo the band and allow me to have a listen to what I'm cutting. In this circumstance, I'm going to change the cue. Make it a bit of a thinner cue. How's that? That's not enough. About 3 is right. So you can hit Control to get to the cue area. So I'm going to just focus these cuts a little bit more.
Consider me gone. Consider me gone. So I'm consider me gone. Consider me gone. So I'm
Notice how now we're actually very close to the tonal balance of our reference track, even taking into consideration the differences in instrumentation, etc. The low end is almost bang on the money. Still got that little dip there, that's okay. We're not going to worry too much about that. It's only 2 decibels. And the high end, again, is almost completely identical. And it's sounding really tight now in the low end. So we did those nice cue changes here in bass drum, soloing it using Control, and that allowed us to kind of dial in the exact sound that we wanted. And I just pulled it back slightly away from the target because I felt that was a bit too much of a cut. And I feel like it's working very nicely. So let's compare it to the pre-master and the reference track and see how we're getting on.
consider me gone. So I'm
So that's sounding very comparable. However, I feel like our track is sounding a little bit too harsh, actually. So what I might do is I'm going to go into Mix Room and I'm going to adjust the mid side of the bands to see if I can get it sounding a little less harsh. It's this one.
consider me gone. So I'm
So I've copied the settings over to B so I can jump back and forth between those two versions. So I'm taking those kind of more, the harsh frequency range, setting those bands to the mid channel only so we're not processing the side. And that will give us a little bit less of a boost, but still kind of focusing on the snare and the vocals. So let's do an A-B test and see which we prefer. It's definitely, A is sounding much better to me. So the mid-channel boost in this range really takes the edge off and makes it not too harsh. What I might do is just add a little bit more stereo boosting to the sides here, just by clicking and dragging this out to maybe 20% side.
Consider me gone. Consider me gone. So help me.
Really high in there.
Consider me gone. Consider me.
That one's okay in stereo. It's definitely an improvement. So just focusing it very much on the mids, but then in boosting it out to the perfect amount of side. There's so much control that I can get here, and that is sounding really nice. And it's kind of taken away that harshness.
Consider me gone. Consider me
Very nice. So let's have a look at the ending. I think there might be some noise here. So let's have a listen. Oh, there's a lot of noise. Okay, so what can we do to get rid of that? We're going to highlight this little section here. Highlight that little section there. Focusing on the noise itself. There's nothing else happening during that range. So I'm going to open up the, where are you? Spectral Denoise RX. I'm going to click Learn, and it's going to analyze that section there and come up with a solution. Okay, so there's a big low end bump there. So now that I click Learn, let's see how it does to actually remove it. I fear that the low end bump might be very challenging for RX to actually get rid of. So if I start playing the track, let's listen to how it deals with it.
Says it's a curse with a little bit of perks for sure. Nowadays, my genitals getting nerd from girls who hate nerds, poets and spoken word. And they never tell their friends that they love Austin. In the poem that he did got them a little wet, so they send a little text, but they call I miss, and I won't reply. I'll be single all my life just to get it right. Most of my life I would.
I'm noticing that when I click bypass, the level line goes back to 0, and when I turn this on, the bass actually drops by about 1.5 decibels. So I now have to think of a solution here that's going to allow me to take out some of that hiss without that low end issue, because the hiss is easy to get rid of. The low end rumble is less easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try this again. This time I'm going to add an EQ before. I'm just going to do a cut so that it focuses much more on the high frequencies. I'm going to learn again and try this one more time. Let's see. It's not liking that for some reason. Let's learn. Let's try it again. Okay, learn. Okay. See, that low end hum is still there because we hadn't removed it as much. So now let's see how this sounds in the chorus again. I'm going to bypass it to check the level line. Let's go for this one. Okay, that's with it on. If I bypass now, let's see if the tonal balance changes. Okay, that is very comparable now. So now we're not changing the tonal balance with this. We've tested that, so that's good, but we're still removing that high-end hiss. If we turn it on. There we go. much less hiss. Not completely gone, but that's okay. And the beginning, nothing there. So there we want to just, if I was mastering this for a client, make sure that we just had a tiny bit of an intro. And we're straight into it. A good final test as well is you can have levels open whilst you're going through the track. You've got your looking at the true peak, dynamic range, and LUFS. You can check it in mono, and I like to check the difference as we go into the different sections. So, for example, how we go from the quiet sections into the louder sections, and these transitions. This is a really important part of the dynamics in the track when mastering. So let's have a listen.
Like I used to, so I'm leaving. Consider me gone. Consider me gone. Hey, I'm saying what up to the world. What up to my ex, trifling girl. Nowadays, I don't really talk to that girl, cause my rhymes is my work, and my work comes first. And of course, I with a little bit of perks, for sure. Nowadays, my genitals getting nerd from girls who hate nerds, poets and spoken word. No, 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 I don't love you like I used to, so I'm leaving. Consider me gone. Consider me gone.
Sounding very nice. Let's have one final look at the limiter. So we'll loop the louder section, which is that final chorus. We're going to click Analyze, and we'll see what we're being suggested in terms of attack and link as well.
Consider me gone. Consider me gone.
Perfect, so actually our gain setting was totally fine. We could push it up a touch if we wanted to, but coming in at -7 LUFS short term is absolutely fine. If I brought it down as well, that might be a little bit too quiet for what we're looking for, so that's okay. But this is like, this range here that you're seeing, that's like the okay range. Where were we? We were 13, weren't we? That's fine. The attack is 2439 based on the transients of this song. So that's nice and open to allow those transients to poke through. We're going to leave the release on auto because that just works best with the actual song itself. If you want to turn that off and do it yourself, you absolutely can, but I never do. Auto just sounds better. We've tested it a lot. Link. So this is how much link is at 100%. You will be limiting the left and right signals at the same time, the same amount, and at 0. You're not. At 0, you're limiting them individually, and that can lead to a louder master, but with more variation between the stereo field compared to the pre-master. So what this does is it looks at the correlation of your pre-master and suggests a good link setting based on that, to kind of keep the stereo integrity of your track whilst optimizing for loudness as well. So here everything seems to be in order. One of the things I like to do is just do a test of the bypass, which is a loudness matched, level matched bypass enabled. You can turn that off in settings if you really want to, but it allows me to preview the before and after of the limiting. So it boosts the volume to give us the same amount of loudness. So you do get some clipping afterwards, but in a DAW environment, that's totally fine. It allows you to hear just how transparent this limiter is, because it's very, very comparable to the before, even though we've chopped off all those transients. So let's have a listen.
Consider me gone. Consider me gone.
So it really maintains the integrity of the overall sound, which is great. So now all we have to do is we're going to chuck it into expose and have a listen and look and see how close we are and see if there are any issues. So let's go. So let's have a look. So we're analyzing the loudness, the peak, the stereo field, and the dynamics. So here we've got the integrated loudness. LUFS is -9.1 and the short term is -7.2. So that's great. We've not pushed it too hard, and we've controlled the dynamic range, so it's pretty loud throughout. It's going to be very competitive in terms of its loudness compared to other tracks. And here we've got the true peaks are under control. There's no and normal decibels, of course. There's no moments in the track where the left-right balance is too lopsided, and there are no phase issues. Dynamic range, this is a short-term figure and shows me that there's plenty of punch throughout. And the loudness range, it looks at the statistical difference between the quieter section and the louder sections. So this is 3.2. That is verging on it's very, very consistent throughout. Anything below 4 is basically very consistent throughout, and we can see that because there's not much of a difference between the short-term max and the integrated loudness. That's fine for this genre of music. In fact, there's not really a right or wrong answer when it comes to loudness range. It just depends on the music. And anything above 6 is considered to be a very dynamic loudness range. Some tracks have up to 12. Completely depends. Most hip-hop and this kind of music is a very static, driving sound all the way through. Let's load up our reference track and we'll compare it here. So reference track goes in here. I'm going to click reference track and let's have a look. So here we can see the range is plus minus 5 decibels. So our track has a little bit more low end, a little bit of a bump here like we saw before, a little bit less in the high end, and very comparable in the very high frequencies. As I've mentioned a few times, having a plus minus 3 decibel difference is absolutely fine because that accounts for the differences and variations in instrumentation and the rest of it. So absolutely fine. This is definitely in the ballpark. What we can do, this is great. So I'm very happy with this. It's passed the test. There are no issues here. If I wanted to change it to, for example, mastering for Spotify, now we might see some issues come up here. So we'll have more true peaking because we want to have that. In fact, here you go. I can click the feedback and that will tell me exactly what the issues are. So the loudness issue, minus 9.1. The LUFS integrated loudness target is minus 14 plus minus 2 for the Spotify preset. So we'd have to adjust the input limit, the limiter's input gain by, we'd have to turn it down by 5 decibels to reach the average loudness of 14. So that makes sense. Minus 9 minus 5 equals minus 14. So that would give us the correct loudness if we were shooting for Spotify. So with regards to the peak, so when you're mastering for streaming sites, you want to shoot for minus 1. So we'd have to adjust the limiter output gain by about 1 to basically match up with that. But we'd have to adjust the input gain to account for this peak as well. So it depends what the preset is, but in this case, we're going for an all-around or club master, so that's absolutely fine, and that gives us good settings all around. Great. So I hope you found this very helpful. Keep pushing, keep mastering, and with each one you do, I'm sure you'll make dramatic improvements, and it's all about practice. So just keep going and keep implementing these techniques, and you'll get your music sounding better than ever. Thanks for watching.